Hello and welcome to Warblog. Today we're looking at Operation Samen ol Aemeh, Iran, Middle East, 1981. I've already started this. I did the video and it wasn't perfect, so we've sort of got start mode. First thing I'm going to just talk about is just a little bit about the geography. I mean, essentially we've got Abadan down here, which is under siege. And now, what I was basically, from what I can see, it's not fully under siege. Now, I've got my map based on the Pierre Razal book on the Iran-Iraq War, which is very vague because it just sort of shows a very sort of general line. So that line could, you know, I mean, we've got the front line looking like that, but it could have been more like this, or it could have been more like that. Or it could have been more like this. I don't know where the front line was, so that's something that is to some extent open to debate, so to speak, but to all intents and purposes one line is sort of as good as another for the purposes of this game. Obviously it'd be really good if we can get them perfect, but the point is it's not a full siege, so in the sense that, and there's no written evidence for this, I'm just by observation, by looking at it and inferring, well, if this is actually correct, then there's obviously, you know, you can ride your bike down there without going through the Iraqi front lines. But the thing is, you wouldn't get major supplies to feed a major city, you know, through there. And as such, I think, you know, it does constitute a siege. And obviously the Iranians want to break that siege. And the first thing they do is they carry out a feigned attack much further north, you know, put this map again, towards Basra, you know, this road probably leads to Basra up there. And the Iraqis reinforce that sort of area, and they don't reinforce down here. And so this attack is a sort of a surprise attack to some extent. Now, let's just reload that game, that squiggly line. Another map out. So now basically what happens, I think on the the diversionary attack happens on the 22nd. Let's have a look. But the main attack was preceded by a sort of Iranian Air Force carrying out airstrikes against you know, Iraqi troops. You know, between the Bahmanshir River and the east bank of the Karun. The Karun's is the east bank. So they basically air attack wherever you want in there. You might want to go for the artillery, or you might want to cherry pick this one, because that looks like the first section you might want to attack as you come over the river. But so essentially, what they actually did during the night, the Iranians, and it always amazes me when statements like this are made. Well, essentially the Iranians infiltrated a force of 20 to 30,000 troops across the Bahmanshir River towards the Iraqi forces on the east bank. Now, that's them. You know, and I interpret that they snuck, you know, to sneak, the verb, 20 to 30,000 troops across the river. And that's a pretty major undertaking. Now, I don't know where they come, because that's all it is. Well, there's the Bahmanshir River. So did they come across here? Well, that might make sense, but you know, I find them hard to sort of sneak into there. They could have snuck them along there, but it's still pretty close. So I'll put them down here. It puts them a nice 2 hexes away, and there's 20 to 30,000 units in there. There's 15,000 units around here. I've added a few more armoured units, mechanised units, and plus we've got the Marines here, to sort of balance out the difference between the units will have to stay behind. For example, this lot here, there's a token effort of defence of Abadan. So basically what happens is, you know, during the night they sneak all these units over here into an assault position. Now the thing is, because it's desert, they're going to take a while to get there. I mean, it's going to be 1 turn there, 2 turns, so you know it's hardly going to be a surprise, but hopefully we should be able to, you know, really take out these hexes here, but also move into here. But what I'm sort of maybe trying to build up to here is that is the main attack force. Now this line over here essentially is not in play. So you don't use this side of the map. This is just here as a representative of the defensive line. Other than maybe you can use your artillery. It is within 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can maybe start peppering up these units if you want. But on turn 8, you get reinforcements there, and you get reinforcements there. Basically, you get the 92nd Armoured Division enter. So there's a lot of armour there. I've given them some mechanised here because I think the Armoured would be on its own, and with motorised troops who are the Iranian Republican Guard, I think it is. So you get some reinforcements, and that comes on turn 8. So what we're saying here, to some extent, is that we're giving it sort of 8 turns per day. Now that doesn't really make sense directly or implicitly into how I've designed and put things together, because it's going to take about 3 turns just to get into contact. So it's sort of up to you how you sort of play that. I mean, they do appear here, so it's going to take them at least 3 or 4 turns, well, 3 turns, depending on how fast they move, because they've all got 6 movement to sort of get into combat. Maybe a little bit less here, but the point is, it's just if I sort of tried to make it realistic, we don't really want you waiting around to turn 20 until you get to that point. So bring them on. Turn 8 seems like a reasonable sort of amount of time to wait for these, the second day sort of things that come on the second day, and so basically you don't use any of this stuff here. You can use the artillery, but if you so chose to, you could. My take on this, to some extent, in particular with some of the other Iran-Iraq games, is that you sort of think, well, okay, fair enough, we've got this big line of troops, and it's only got 1 basically in each of these fortified hexes. Well, that's stacked with artillery, but the whole idea of moving everything out, it's sort of, I don't like that, because then they said, well, what's defending the rest of Iran? I mean, presumably, they would have left a defensive line, so that's the minimum defensive line. But when you get your division on there, the 92nd Armoured, they will come down here, and basically the historic narrative is that obviously we determined that they did their feigned attack up here on the 22nd, and then on the 26th they snuck, in the night of the 26th, they snuck all these units over, and then they start their assault. Now they start their assault sort of obviously down here, and then what happens is the Iraqis are taken totally by surprise, and they don't react. Most of the units just are completely decimated. The ones that hold out don't really move much, and the units don't really move out of their defensive locations. And so now I'm not sure how much damage you'll be able to do in that 8 turn sort of period, but when so essentially they're really battered by this assault. And to reflect that, you might say, well, I'm not going to move any of my Iraqi units other than the ones that, if you get this as a retreat or a rout, if it gets pushed back to there, you can start moving it. But you wouldn't start moving this in order to sort of bolster up a front line. You just leave them sat there if you want to reflect that sort of the way that worked. And then the second day, when they brought their armour in here, it caused complete chaos. One of the things it notes is that I think they had the same sort of tanks, T-52 tanks, T-55s, and that caused the Iraqis a bit of confusion because they looked exactly like their own tanks. But that's sort of irrelevant. Basically, they caused an entire rout of all of this unit. Everything routed. That was the effect of that armoured assault on to the north here. So presumably you would start pushing this line back. I think it's a bit optimistic to think that you'd get there by the second day. But supposing you did, or maybe historically they did, and then you've got this other attack coming in here, and so you can sort of see that pocket, getting smaller and smaller. The bridge has actually been destroyed, but they put in a temporary pontoon bridge, and that's near Darkhovin there, and they basically flee across the river. They leave behind tons and tons of things. Let's see whether it states. I think it says 100 tanks were captured. They basically left, 100 tanks, like 200 armoured vehicles, APCs or armoured cars, those sorts of things, and sort of like hundreds of artillery units. They just left them behind. They just fled over this river. So basically, that's the objective. That's the game in a nutshell. So essentially, what you'd be looking to do is to create an Iranian victory with all the units fleeing over the bridge. And that's why the only objective in the game is Darkhovin, which sort of makes sense really, because if you don't move these units, you've got to move these units all the way along here and up to Darkhovin, and then with these tank armoured units sort of push from this way, etc. So I think it's a particularly interesting military strategy, sort of an interesting example of military strategy. Again, it's one of these things that you can't necessarily model and reflect, because essentially you can't necessarily model and reflect the fact that they were surprised and they never moved their units out of their defensive positions and they turned into a rout. So in theory it's one of these things, well, maybe they could hold out. Well, we'll see how that sort of works. Let me just get rid of all these squiggly lines and maybe start a new bunch of squiggly lines. One thing to say is the Iranians have air superiority. Now the Iraqis have got 3 aircraft, so 1, 2, 3. So all this is addition. Yeah, all this is in addition to what they have. But the Iraqis actually have their 4 fours. But so that'd be interesting to see how you play that, whether or not you try to carry out airstrikes, whether you put in, because if they've got 4, you think, well, okay, we could put 4 threes in, that's more, but they're not as strong. So how much are you going to put in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Would that be the possibility of Iraq putting in 3 of their fighter planes into the air, to compete for air superiority? Because if you only put in 3, Iraq might go for it. See who wins. If they put in 4, it might still go for it. I think 6 is unlikely, but that only leaves you then with 2 units to carry out air attacks and a bunch of helicopters. And so it's one of the first games where I think it's going to be interesting to see how air superiority actually works. And so that said, we can sort of almost start. The only thing to just sort of maybe sort of just focus on just before, I have had a think. I've been looking at it, so I quite like this map. Obviously, it's going to take 2 turns to even get into the fighting position here, which is a bit of a pain. And ironically, being a shorter distance, it's going to be super easy to get into a position here. But this, we're going to storm into this hex here, and that's it. I mean, we're in contact. So this is actually a very important hex. And I was thinking it was very convenient because, what I should have done really is put more Iraqis in there to reflect how important that was, but I haven't done that. And what I've also noted, the artillery is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just conveniently out of reach of Abadan. So it just makes me wonder why they'd actually put their artillery there. And obviously that's a designer error or issue, but I've left them there because to some extent I was thinking, well, they're probably not bombing Abadan every day, for like the last 3 or 4 months or 6 months. I mean, they probably, don't want to do that for humanitarian reasons, etc., etc. So I put it there as more of a defensive position for a defensive placement for their own units. For example, this one is quite good because you get it. You've got that 4 radius. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got a nice sort of coverage, whatever that is, around all of this. You can cover all of these units, which is nice. So anyway, that in mind, obviously we can't take Darkhovin straight away. We've got nothing to move over here. It's all defensive at the moment. So what I'm going to do now, it does state that they started off with the airstrikes and basically artillery. It says here the Iraqis were pinned down in their strongest positions while their weakest positions were torn through, resulting in the isolation of many Iraqi forces. Iraq failed to manoeuvre their forces against the Iranians, and they stood in their static positions, etc., etc. So, I'm going to put in. It's working. I'm going to put in 6. Because I want to have 2 to 1. And I'm going to try and do some artillery against these units. .73. It's not a lot. Let's just see what we can do over here. I mean, I wouldn't want taking out this air defense unit. That's nice. That'll take a while to recover, or not recover at all. Okay, so 4.1, 3.5, so that's good. So, it's a shame we didn't do more damage there. I mean, there's no difference between that position and that position. We did quite a bit of there. That would have been nice. So they're not particularly damaged. It's got 3 depressions. Because what I'm thinking is I use the remainder of my air power against these artillery units. I really want to sort of try and take them out. So I think I'm going to start, and this is going to be a hairy one here, because there's a lot of, they're both going to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both as risky as each other. Let's see. I wonder if my artillery could have actually got their artillery. That might have been a better thing to use it to do with it. Let's see. So we've got 3 air defense units in there. 1.4 on that. Well, at least he wasn't shot down, but he was affected, so he's at quarter strength. So, a little lower. These helicopters are going to be difficult. Let's see. Well, if we take a lot of damage, at least they're not being lost. Was aborted. It's interesting because I've not done a sort of something as intense as this air power wise at all, really. Quarter strength, you know, that just shows, you know, this air defense capability actually working. Aborted. The helicopters are very susceptible to air defense. Half strength. So we managed to sort of sneak in there with some attacks. A lot of what we did was reduced or aborted, but that's good, although it's not particularly brilliant. I mean, to be quite honest, they're going to recover all of these sort of low numbers. I've just got to keep doing it. But I really want to start damaging their artillery, because artillery makes a lot of difference in everything. Now, this is going to be boring. Yeah, I can only move once. Well, I won't say boring, at least they seem to be doing it quite quickly, because they're only moving 1, I guess. It's not as bad. It's when you've got a stack this big and they've got to move them 6. That's a HTML thing. It always bugs me when that happens, because I couldn't do it if I tried. At least I imagine I couldn't do it. So we've moved that stack, which didn't take too long. Now this is the magic stack, and let's face it, it's all going to get stuck into there. Not yet. Let's reload. Okay. Now we should be able to move a lot of this infantry straight through. And this is where you might start to think that there should be stacking rules in this game or something. But you know, I'm not going to mess around for the simple reason that this is the opening assault, and it pretty much has to work, and it's deceptive. Now I'm going to leave that there as a defence, token defence against that. When the stacks are fiddly like that, you sort of have to doesn't have enough movement to make that the rest of that move, because it wasn't a road into minutia. Okay, so we've done all our movement, which wasn't too painful, and here we have our magic attack. This might break the map, I wonder. Yeah, look. Wow. So I think we need, well, they're going to be 8 times 3 for fortification, so that's 824. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, getting up to a 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 7 to 1. Now it's going to be a lot higher because we've got armour. They're going to be higher and they're worth more anyway. So in theory, my calculations are right. We should have a 7 to 1. Which sounds like a lot of overkill, but to some extent, that is the everything going against it for a 7 to 1 against this stack. So let's see whether I'm right or whether I miscalculated anything. Well, that was a lot of overkill, but and we've got some armour in there. We might be able to move forward. Let's cheat. We should be able to move all the armour in there at least. I think that's all the armour. Let's have a quick look. I think we're pushing the limits for sort of the number of units we could possibly have doing anything sensible. We've got another armoured unit there. I don't think they're going to be taking that in a hurry. And the only other thing to sort of contemplate is, now they were reduced. That was one thing I didn't take into account actually. In that battle you'll notice that they were about 19 strength value, and that's because they'd been attacked. So if I attack this, they will probably be more like 24, which would mean I would probably be a maximum of 2 to 1 on an attack like that. So I'm not going to push that. I mean, I'm very happy just to have a presence in that hex at this stage, and if I can, I'm going to blitz through here and start doing all that stuff. So I'm quite happy with that as a first turn, and it was what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, you know, this is going to be the critical hex to get. I mean, you come out, there's no other way because you're going to get stuck in a zone of control. So taking that hex like that is essential, and it gives me a little bit of scope. I mean, basically, it's probably not going to give me the blitz through or anything like that, because I'm going to move there next turn, because that will be a zone of control. They'll probably move some reinforcements to block that line. As I said, they're not really going to do much sort of manoeuvring wise, so it'll be interesting to see what the Iraqis do. And as I'm not going to play this all the way through, we're not going to get to the 92nd Armoured Division coming on. I'd love to do that, but I don't want to commit that much time. I'd rather spend that sort of time actually making more scenarios. 1 minute. I just had a little look at the Wikipedia thing, and the Iranian losses were 3,000 and the Iraqi losses were 1,500. That's men, and to some extent, this was human wave type attacks. I mean, I've given them some armour here because it's symbolic and representative. It's not detailed in the Wikipedia or any references that they had armoured units in support, but it's representative of the fact that I'm pretty sure they would have had some armour, they just wouldn't have a significant amount. I've given them a reasonably significant amount there, which is maybe a bit, maybe I shouldn't have, and if I hadn't, they wouldn't maybe have had that 7-to-1, because these get, they're not just 7s, they're sort of like, they're like 10s, 11s against these infantry units, so they're pretty powerful. So if they weren't there, it might have been a 7-to-1, but I think they'll be having a lot harder time. But anyway, down here, so we're not going to move anything because that's how the sort of narrative works. But I think we can move some of these things, which are sort of reinforcements, and maybe shuffle these things around a little bit. But we've got some artillery. We don't really want to be too much with that, but we can fire the artillery. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure whether this will be in range. But I think it's fair to move the armour down. Right, let's move and at least try and protect this hex. Okay, right. So here we go with the air power first. What do? Do we try and claim air superiority, or do we use it to try and damage this? And it's not a predicament or conundrum or paradox, but because you're not strategically thinking, you think, well, I'm going to use it because it's a game. So if this was maybe a fully fledged game, there might be some victory point losses on your aircraft, and if we lose the aircraft, you lose a significant number of victory points. That would, possibly encourage you to not use them, or at least not use them. Now, obviously, if you're playing against someone who didn't know how to play the Iranians, they might not put anything into air superiority. So, and I'm sort of half tempted to sort of maybe try an air superiority to see how it works, or to even see whether it works, because the game sometimes do things and then also I realise a year down later it's not quite working as it was when I last left it. But I don't want to do that, and I sort of don't really want to attack this, but I'm sort of tempted to. So first thing I'm going to do is some artillery. Now that's the risk they had of putting all their armour in there, but hopefully I'm going to take this artillery out quickly. I mean, in retrospect, I might have done well leaving it I really wanted to secure that breakthrough hex. And now the question is, do we run the risk? The thing is, I think actually, to be quite honest, this is what quite excites me about this game and how this works in particular. It's a big bag of nothing at all, because if I use this air power and maybe do a little bit of damage here but lose it, that frees up 6 units. So by keeping it, by not using my air power, so it's a big double bluff of two sides not using 9 air units, because I'm going to leave those on the ground, and that forces him to keep these in the air, and they will lose their movement allowance over time. But they've got 100 turns of air superiority, so I think they're going to cover this game. But they're basically facing each other off and nothing's ever going to happen with that, and it's sort of like, well, that's fantastic strategy, isn't it? How exciting is that, not using your air units? But that's sort of how it works, and to some extent, the Iraqis, they were known for not wanting to fly their planes, not doing anything that was in any way risky, launching rockets at maximum distance and then running home, fleeing at the first sign of any sort of lock-on, just so that they could preserve their aircraft, which is fair enough when they're millions of pounds each. But that sort of, the air war was sort of quite interesting in that regard. Because there were limited resources, and they basically, both sides pretty much sort of ran out of aircraft in sort of medium long term. They were very scarce and were not being used because they didn't want to lose them, and that's sort of what we're doing here, really. So that's interesting. So we've taken a bit of damage. I'm not happy with the amount of damage that we've taken on the armour here, but we've sort of got the ability now to maybe continue. Now, we've done some damage against this. Now he's got depression 0.3, depression 2 point whatever. I'm going to use my artillery to really try and pound their artillery. No effect, and that is exactly not what I'm doing. Now that was better. Oh, look at that, 2 lots of no effect. Now that wasn't even statistically plausible. The artillery is pretty much the only thing that can really damage. I mean, they've done some damage to my main armoured sort of units there. I'm going to continue pounding this. So if I had all my air assets, I'd be able to do a lot more damage. I haven't had anything aborted or half-strengthed yet. Well, there you go. Let's wait too soon. Yes, I didn't want to say I haven't had anything blown up yet, because you can have destroyed, shot down, and I said, well, I'm not going to say that. So I kept quiet because I knew if I said it, the next thing would happen, it would be shot down. So I didn't say that. There's not having anything shot down, but so we've done a little bit more damage, 8.3. I mean, these could be routing soon, so that's still good. They've still got lots of artillery to fire at these Iranian units, which is going to be a problem. But we can. Okay. Right. I'm going to move as much of this stuff as I can into there. I wonder if it's moving in there. I can't really tell. Yes, it appears that it is. I've used my artillery. Okay. Now what? So it's going to be worth 10. So we've got to get some armour in there. Let's use half the armour, which gives us 21. That would be a 2 to 1. 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. And just to make sure, that should be about 7 to 1. 5 to 1. And a DR. Okay. And they split up into different areas because I want to go for this artillery. Or this artillery. I'm clicking, there we go, clicking through that. 3, 4, 5, should be one more in there somewhere. No, there isn't, I've got more here. Lots of movement left. Trying to find the units that engaged in that last assault. Because they'll be free to move. Or not, because they don't have enough movement. Okay. Well, I really want to get through to that artillery. DE. A DR. How much movement do they have? .4. Didn't get any routes on them. Okay. Okay, well, the mistake I made to some extent, well, maybe not. There's no armour in this assault. Ouch, look at that, it's off the map. That's a pain. Can't get the ones down here because they're underneath this element. Oh dear. Oh well. self-imposed limitation on how much I can stack. See what happens. I have no idea. 3 or 4 to 1, 5 to 1. Well, that was a better result than the 7 to 1 and the DE. No movement, no movement, no movement. 0.1, 0.1. I think that's going to be the max on any of those, so we can't move into that other hex, but can we do some damage here? I don't want to risk the damage. It might be like a 3 to 1 and I get an exchange, or oops, or attack and retreat. I don't want to, you know, at this stage I don't want to risk the full integrity of my main driving force. Come on, hurry up. Okay. And here, so these are much more sensible stacks, you can see everything. We'll have a plus 10% bonus on this. Four to 1 DR. Should have left something actually to make that move in there. I quite often do remember to do that, but obviously they'll just be able to move straight back in, and so that's that. But already we're starting to pummel the lines, which is good. Let's do our attacks here. So we can get some routes, starting to sort of take some damage at that end as well. .4, 4.6, 3.1. Going in the right direction. Okay, so we end the turn for the Iranians. Now the Iraqi turn. See, they're not really in a position to attack. Now we can attack with these units because they've been ousted, or we can move them back. But there's not really they can do. You know, they can't sort of start manoeuvring these because we're playing it. They're just pinned to their positions. But I think we're going to use what we can to block. Move this anti-aircraft into there. Ooh, look at that. Well, you can't go into the marsh. The armoured can. That's strange. The armoured can, but the mechanised can't. Let's see if we can do some more damage on this armoured column with the artillery. So we lost some armour there. Historically they did lose 150 tanks in this battle. And that's it. So it's going to be 4, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 1. DE. Hmm. 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1. It's not going to be a brilliant attack. Let me have another think about that. I've got some artillery here and fire. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hang on. Not brilliant odds. Oh, we've got one of their artillery units at last. Okay, I'm going to do what I was going to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I should do it. 7 to 1, okay. Looking for the units that have still got some movement. There we go. DR. DE. Does anything have any movement? I don't think so. No. They're knackered. There's going to be nothing in here with any movement, is there? No. 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 What have we got over here? Three to one. Okay, let's see what we can do against this artillery. There's a lot more air defence around that. So much so that I'm not going to put my helicopters against that. Haha! Got them. Depression 4, so I don't want to go against that anymore. I want to take that out if I can. No effect. Shot down. Well, they lost, well, I don't know what these are, but they lost 9 AH-1Js, 2 CH-47s and 3 Bell 214s. So, there you go. Shot down. Ouch. 2 in a row. Aborted. So there's some dead helicopters around here. And he's not got any depressions. Okay. Well, that's the end of that turn. I'm not going to take it any further. I think it's interesting. I think it's a bit of a bit too many, not so much too many units, but I'm feeling the effect of the units, especially when they overflow the battle box. And I think it's interesting that I lost a lot of armour. I mean, I only had 6 armoured units, and they were just put in there tentatively, but you know, we're down to 3, and there's not much left of them. So that's sort of interesting how it did take the brunt of the spearhead, so to speak. But we have broken through here. We've definitely broken through here, and we've definitely broken through here. I mean, I think we'll probably get these 2 hexes next turn. You know, these two units against that possibly, and then these, possibly moving these into there. We can get a 3 frontal into there, taking that chunk out. Next turn, definitely move against this artillery unit. Try and move forward with what's left of the armour to break that up. And then basically that would, you know, I mean, to some extent there's not much left there. There will be nothing left along here. So that's almost a complete line. We just had to follow along here, so it'll be long and difficult, but we're sort of broken through, and to some extent we can say, well, we can sort of push through here. I think it'd be quite feasible to get through to here. It's only sort of turn 2, it's really sort of turn 3, I guess. It will be turn 3 next turn, so we're looking at the beginning of turn 3 of the situation as it stands. So, you know, by the second day, the 92nd could be coming on just at that right time. It looked like an arrow. Yeah, so I'm interested. I think that's quite interesting. I think it's a bit long. I mean, it's a long game. It's certainly. I've been doing this for almost an hour now, 56 minutes, and really we've only sort of just broken through at the very front there. But interesting to see how the air power worked and how both sides really sort of sit it out. You know, making not much use of a lot of air power at all. And yeah, so I'm quite happy with that. It'll be interesting to see how much damage that these units can actually do moving forward. I mean, no one's. He's got 1 depression. I mean, they have been damaged, and they have taken a little bit of flak. So they're not bulletproof, but we should be able to sort of, you know, sweep up here quite quickly. But then I think you also got to sort of bear in mind the significance of not moving and not responding to these attacks in the same way that you might have thought. Because we could have shuffled a lot along. We could have replaced that by shuffling everything along the line, you know, thinning it out here, for example. You know, we could be redeploying a lot of. We could be redeploying. I haven't got the drawing tool on. Could be redeploying these units, or some of them, down here, taking units out of here. In fact, you know, there's quite a bit in there actually we could have taken down. We didn't move this. So interesting, really, and being interesting to sort of play it again a few times. So I'll leave it at that anyway. You know, I quite enjoy these sort of larger scale games, but they're definitely difficult to sort of really get to grips with. But you know, if you feel that you can do that, you know, feel free to play variants of it, you know, where you can do whatever you want. You know, for example, you could move all these units across. That's a charge. I mean, you know, you could move all these units, or you could try attacking through there. You know, things that are not historically, you know, in historic sort of narrative, so to speak. So anyway, you know, so you basically can play it if you want, signing up and all that. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll speak to you later. Cheerio, bye.